Thank you for joining us today. We have an amazing speaker, two wonderful guest speakers, and loads of material to cover today. Today's session was inspired by the audience. That's correct, inspired by you. Across many of our retirement communities, we're hearing your requests regarding memory care. This message has come loud and clear. We understand. You want to live in a Viva retirement community, but are confused due to the lack of a memory care unit. Well, today we'll clear this up. Seeking care for the cognitively declined is a very broad request, and it isn't the same for everyone, meaning your needs are individual, and therefore memory care cannot be regarded as a one-size-fits-all, because it simply isn't. We will break down what a memory care unit truly is and if it's the right option for your loved one. Today, we'll break down the mystery. We will discuss memory care options, hear testimonials, and learn exactly how successful your loved one can reside at a Viva retirement community. But first, before I introduce our great speaker, there are a few housekeeping items to review. Today's session is being recorded. So folks, if your camera is on, consent is assumed. Your speakers have been muted, so please keep them muted until it's your time to speak. Questions are welcome throughout the presentation in the chat line or live. So in the chat line throughout the conversation, feel free to type in any of your questions. However, we'll reserve answering the questions to the end of the session or the end of the speaker's presentation. And it's at that point that you can also unmute yourself and ask your questions if you wish. So now to the reason why we're here today. Completing the puzzle speaker, Amanda Lynde, Viva's healthcare consultant and former Viva Whitby Shores community director. Amanda is a dear friend and a colleague whose passion to work with seniors comes through with every single story. Additionally, I'd like to welcome Audrey, who has a telling story really to share with you today. She has firsthand experience in trying to navigate the perfect retirement community for her mother who has cognitive impairment. And I'd like to welcome Gord as well. He is a longtime community member at Viva Mississauga, and he too has a story to share about his experience with his wife and her cognitive decline. So that said, it's time for me to welcome Amanda. Hello, Amanda.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me, Sasha.
On behalf of everybody, Amanda, thank you very much for joining us today. We're really excited to hear about your details today. And if you are ready to go, I will mute myself and exit quietly.
Thank you so much, you guys. So as Sasha mentioned, my name is Amanda, and I was the community director at Viva Whitby Shores. And I have been in the retirement industry supporting seniors for the last 20 years. And before that, or during this time, I'm also a nurse. So I've had lots of experience kind of navigating memory care from a nursing perspective, memory care from a personal perspective. My grandfather did have dementia and lived with me during his journey through dementia. And then as a community director, kind of managing communities and helping team members and families kind of navigate the journeys of our community members. So that's just a little bit about me. Today's presentation is really going to be focused on really just how retirement communities can benefit seniors and benefit seniors that have some cognitive impairment. And so without further ado, I'll kind of get started. But as Sasha mentioned, please feel free to kind of pop some questions as we go along, and Sasha can kind of let me know if we can answer them now or hold off till the end. All right. So most of you are here because a loved one or yourself or someone you know is going through some cognitive changes, and you're starting that planning, right? What do I need to do? What does living look like now and kind of in the future? So, medically, it's hard for me to always step away, take my nursing hat off. So the first slide, I really just wanted to chat with you guys just about what the kind of typical changes can be like when we're starting to have some cognitive decline. And so mostly is just that forgetfulness and misplaced items, right? Which really means that, I might misplace my keys, which I do today currently, and don't know where I put them. But the key is when you find those keys, you know what to do with them, right? If you know what to do with them, that's pretty normal aging forgetfulness. But if you find those keys and you're struggling to figure out, okay, now what do I do with these keys? That's when you're starting to have a cognitive impairment, right? Because you've kind of missed that connection on what I do with it once I find it. They might also have some slowed speech. So I kind of recognize this when people with dementia, they typically have an ongoing conversation, right? But the speech can be a little bit slower because they're still, their mind is trying to catch up with that word finding, right? Where you and I can have a conversation today that's pretty fast paced. Our cognitive ability keeps up pretty quickly with what we're talking about. But for someone with some cognitive impairment, you find it slowed down a little bit just because they're trying to find the connections with the words that they're trying to say. You might also see some mobility changes or some poor coordination. Again, it's that our brains work so fast. And when there's starting to be interruption in cognitive impairments, then you start to see the things we take for granted, like our speech, our mobility, our walking, starts to change. And our gait starts to change, or our coordination starts to change. And falls can happen. Missing steps, like walking up steps or walking down steps, things can be missed, or not seeing a handrail or know what to do with the handrail. You also see a lot of emotional changes for everybody involved, for the person, for families, for spouses. There's just so much emotion when it comes to a diagnosis of a cognitive impairment that you'll see agitation and frustration and easy mood swings because, you're trying to do things that you're used to doing and something's missing. So you can have these moments of frustrations or agitation that can be overwhelming. And same with families. We go through the same thing. I often remember my grandmother getting frustrated when my grandfather would do something. She's like, well, he's done this for 20 years. Why can't he continue to remember? Right? It's just not that easy sometimes for someone taking care of somebody with a cognitive impairment to really grasp and understand what's going on. And then just behavioral changes, it's a tougher diagnosis. So there can be depression, again, with the spouse, with the person, with family. A lack of desire to, even bathe and get up in the morning. We see collecting and hoarding because they want to keep things they recognize close to them. And so we often see those types of behaviors kind of come out, right? And it's kind of natural. You want to keep things that make you feel good close to you. So that's when you start to see that kind of hoarding. So in a nutshell, that's just a kind of a few points or a few things that maybe you're starting to see or you're starting to go through as your loved ones or people that are taking this journey. And then, really kind of what's next step, right? And so people start to find themselves looking at community supports, right? And there's some really great community supports out there that we'll chat about. But I really kind of looked at, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because that relates to a child, an adult, a senior, right? We all have the very same 5 things that kind of make who we are, right? So the very first thing, our basic needs are an environment that is clean and supportive, right? And retirement can provide that. Right? We provide housekeeping, we provide meals, we provide that community that they don't have to, worry about maintaining those areas. The next part is that safety. So that's the next level on the hierarchy. So safety in a home versus what a community can give you, right? In a community, so at Viva Oakville or Viva Mississauga, you'll see we have 24-hour nurses on site, right? It doesn't mean that we have eyes on somebody 24 hours a day, okay? But it means that there's medically there somebody to support that person going through their journey. Their expertise, they have extra education in dementia, in cognitive impairment, and how to support them. We do have cameras at our entry points. So if there was ever a concern, if somebody was going to leave the community, we can quickly see where they left, and that really helps figure out maybe where they went or what direction. We have intercom systems. So we have a level of security that, at dawn, so usually when it starts to get dark, the doors will lock. Okay, and that just means fire safety. We can't lock people from going out, but we can lock people from coming in, and they have to use an intercom system. So there's a level of safety there. And we have daily check-ins. So a daily check-in just means that every day we ensure that we saw every community member living in a Viva community. Okay, so we check them at meals, we check them in activities, we have a master list, and everybody uses like a check system. And so, in a 24-hour period, minimally, we see everybody or talk to everybody at least once a day. And it can be higher depending on what kind of services that people require. And then our next one is just the feeling of belonging somewhere and feeling loved, belonging, and that social, those connections are just so important. And we really see seniors or people with cognitive decline or it start to improve a little bit or slow down decline when they have a built-in routine with peers, when they have structure and things to go do every day. It's this sense of community like they grew up with, right? So it's different when I'm talking to somebody versus when a peer is talking to them, right? You connect more to a peer. You have shared experiences, shared stories. I don't know how many times I would walk down to our cafe, and there would be a group of people talking about that they were born in the small little town, and this person was born in the town next to them, and they had cognitive decline, but they could, have this great in-depth conversation about where they were born two towns away and they never knew each other. There's still some great conversation that can happen with those shared connections. And new friendships. There are lots of new friendships kind of bloom, again, from that shared experience. So many spouses have other friends that now who know what they're going through, taking care of a loved one with some decline. And it's almost like a support group. They watch out for each other more than you realize. There's so many times there's a knock at my door and goes, Amanda, did you know this was happening? Or that, Joe was feeling this way. And it's like, I didn't. Thanks for letting me know. So even though they might not feel comfortable telling me, they'll tell a peer. So new friendships, new connections, or old connections. I've seen tons of that also. And then the next kind of level is this esteem, right? How to build esteem. And just because I'm starting to have cognitive impairment or cognitive decline doesn't take away that I can still learn. Okay, it's just learning in a different manner. It depends where the decline is in our brain, but we have many aspects in our brain that can do something different. Like I'm a visual learner. People sometimes need to read. Some people need to do. So even right there, there's 3 ways how we learn, right? Our brain adapts remarkably. So still getting involved in new programs and new activities sparks new train in our brain, right? It's like these little railway tracks all over our brain. We can still create new ones. It doesn't matter our age or our diagnosis. So it's always encouraging to try to learn something new, and it doesn't change. So in Viva, we are always trying to come up with new and fun activities. We have activities that are led by our community members. So there's peer-to-peer. We have support groups, again, that peer-to-peer. We have fun, just random fun things that you might never have done in your life that you might try when you're at Viva. And then we have the structured routines. For some people really thrive in that environment too. So you can think, I get up in the morning, I might sleep in today, I might not sleep in today. You have full flexibility in our communities because of our dining programs, our cafe programs that are open, our dining's open 12 hours a day, our perks is 24 hours a day. So it's a routine that's based on you. We don't expect people to move in and change their everyday living and change their own personal routines to match ours. And you see that sometimes in retirement, but we've really figured out that we need to be flexible because we live flexible. I don't always do the same thing every day, nor do I want to. So we did introduce, 12-hour dining, come and go as you please. The cafe open 24 hours a day. Again, just to make sure people live an individual experience. And then the last is the self. It's just that I believe in myself, I have confidence in myself, and I have access to everything myself needs. So again, in Viva, we really do encourage this self-led activities in our communities. For instance, if you are a gardener, you can take over gardening, you can help us design gardening, you can, really do whatever you want. You get to tell us what you want to do. Maybe you're an artist and you want to share that, or you're a teacher. I had a math teacher, brilliant math teacher, and he would tutor a lot of the team members in some of their high school, in their college math. Like we had math classes. It was brilliant. I tell you, I took a math course and I only passed because of him. If he wasn't my tutor, I would have failed. It was called finite math and I didn't even know it existed. So we really do try and find what they're good at and they can still teach us. He might not have been able to tell me what the weather was yesterday, but he could tell me how to do that math. So it's, and so how we do that, I can share. So the next kind of step is this kind of planning, right? And looking at families and retirement and community and other. So what I can share is just kind of how Viva supports that. Okay, so from a retirement aspect, we start right from the beginning. We call it a prospect-centered approach. So our sales and marketing girls that you'll meet with first, they really do strive to take a deeper dive and get to know that person by listening, by asking questions, by asking history, who you are, who were you, who do you want to be, what motivates you. And it really starts us understanding you. The sales and marketing team sends the rest of us as leadership, as team members, these great stories. I want to introduce these community members to us, or I want to introduce these prospects are coming on a tour today. Here's what's important to them already. Okay, so that starts right early from the beginning. And then our second stage is that wellness, right? Is that wellness kind of meets with them and builds a personalized, we call it plan of care. So what does the plan look like today? What could it look like? What's our goals? Do we want to be more physically active? Do we, want to have less? Maybe we've had a few falls lately. Do we want to work on our strength? Do we want to do a falls? Do we want support with medication? So we kind of look at a care side next, right? From an individual point of view. And that's the same with people with cognitive impairment, right? It's really, we sit down and build it with them. We build it with the spouse and or family, all three parties. We build it with one party, kind of whoever they choose to build the plan with. Because a holistic approach, as you hear right from the beginning, is how we are successful. And then the third point of that at Viva, we also have a person-centered lifestyles program. So our lifestyles is like our recreation team. And so they have a program to help with data collection, right? Which also helps us figure out who, what they like to do. How are they participating by tracking participation, and then really being able to drill down, what are you participating in, what are you not participating in, and making some great individual plans to support that person. So that's how Viva really takes a individual person-centered approach right from inquiry all the way into move-in, and then post move-in, we meet every 6 months or sooner as things change, as needs develop or needs get better. And we have three great things when we like to meet: when goals are met, when goals are changing, or when services are no longer required, right? We see people do better that when they came in, we're able to reduce services. But there are other things we need to also talk about, right? It is just so important that when someone with a cognitive impairment has some good supports, not only from where they're living, which is what we talked about, but from family, friends, because there are moments that can lead to difficult days. It's the same with you and me. We have good days, we have bad days. Somebody with cognitive decline is the exact same. So how do we support them in their bad days, and what does a bad day look like? And once we get to know them, or them, and you can share strategies that's worked, that's where family is just such an integral part of this puzzle when it comes to somebody with cognitive decline. And then we talked about retirement, and then community. There are some great community supports. Okay, so we do have things called day programs, which is where someone with cognitive decline goes and spends a whole day off property and in it's like a community center type setting. We register people with the police just for their on register. They take pictures, so it's quick and easy if there was ever an elopement issue. There are support groups that I highly recommend. The Alzheimer's Society is the most recommended and the highly talked about, but there are support groups with just families within the community. There are support groups for themselves, people who are going through a cognitive decline, to talk to people peer-to-peer. We also run, it's called a Java program, the Java mentorship program at Viva. And it's really that, it's about mentoring each other and being a peer-to-peer support group. And then there's community home and health services that do kind of that physical care if needed. As if anyone's ever had support from community home and health services, there's always challenges, but it is a program that you've bought into. And then last but not least, there are other things like, there's GPS systems that have come very, very far. There's support from specialists. Like we have GAIN clinics in the Durham region, which is a geriatric assessment team, which is phenomenal with resources. But really it's a geriatric specialist. And then really kind of understanding secured areas. So that's kind of what will lead into the next topic, is just understanding a little bit more about secured environments versus non-secured environments, and what the pros and cons kind of are. For instance, when I've been in retirement my whole life, and when my grandfather was going through dementia, it was a tough choice for me. I know the business, I believe in retirement living so much, and I was just too late. It was too late, even though I knew it, to get him into a community where he could get to know people and get to know his surroundings, before his dementia sunk in. And I regret that. I regret not jumping early, but again, like I said, I think everything, and yet it can happen so quickly. So what I teach and preach so much is just early planning, know what you want, know what they want, and get prepared, because it happens so quickly sometimes. Part of the big things that we get is just, we don't understand what the next steps are, right? And we don't have a roadmap for dementia, like we might have for somebody with diabetes or somebody with high blood pressure. You know, it's such an individual disease that here's the, you know, typically the questions I get from families so often is, you know, is when do I need help and where do I go for help? When might I need a secured area? And what kind of changes am I going to see behavioral, physically, and can I afford everything that I'm going to need for them? And those are great questions. So I often talk about that, you know, when do we need help and where do I go for help? So simply, you know, Viva and retirement, we offer help with the basics, like we've talked about, the cooking, the cleaning. We offer great exercise and strength building activities, and we offer mental stimulation. Okay. We also can offer moments of crisis planning. So we can help with any additional support that you might need as things change. We can help with planning and finding resources. And the next question is, when might we need a secured area? So a secured area is a locked floor. Usually it's one floor, you typically with, you know, 20 to 50 people all together. So it's a hard question. And I often say to families, I don't know. But here's typically where retirement can no longer support the needs, is when a community member is purposely leaving the community. Okay, so I mean purposely, because it's hard to redirect purposely versus I just want to go outside. Right? There's two very different aspects of that. Okay, so for instance, when somebody has a will to go home and they want to go home every day, and they're leaving the community every day to go home, it's purposeful. It's very, very hard to combat that. Typically, what I see in early and mid and moderate stages is just the desire to go outside. So they'll leave a door and they'll walk around the block, they'll come back, they'll just walk around the parking lot, they'll walk around the block, and we all get very nervous of it. But to combat that is super simple, is we take them for a walk, you know, because they just wanted to go outside, but they weren't purposely trying to go somewhere. That's the big difference. And so people often say, well, you know, mom's always wanting, you know, is leaving the house. And it's like, well, what is she leaving for? Because once you know what she's leaving for, it's easy to fix it. It's harder to fix it when they have a purposeful desire. And I have seen it once in a while where they just want to go somewhere, and it's very hard to change that. That's the moment when a secured neighborhood or area might be more effective. Okay. But like I said, typically I just want to be outside. I want to go for a walk. It's what I did every day. Then the next question I get often is, will there be behavioral changes? So it's another tough question, and everybody's so different. So I often talk to families about, well, help me understand who they were in the past, because that can help me today. You know, 10 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, we saw a lot of war vets. So there was a lot of PTSD. So yes, there might be some lights and noises that could be triggers for them to be scared, right? So it's understanding the history of what they went through. So good, bad, the ugly is really, really helpful to help us figure out if there's going to be challenges with their cognitive decline. Again, I often share with families, there's going to be frustration, and that's going to be normal because they are trying to communicate and they can't communicate something that we can understand, right? So the longer that they are in our community, the easier it is for us to understand what they're trying to say. And then Viva, again, I shared that, but we really do focus on the person and individual through our care planning sessions and through discussions and discovery. Do we really fully grasp? And that's where families come in big help us learn what works with them. You know, even something as simple as understanding their favorite music or their favorite song can be calming. You know, what do you do when you hear your most favorite song? You know, I sing or I shuffle a little bit in my feet. It instantly changes my mood. So those are some of the key factors I would love to find out. And then, yes, you always need to talk about finances and how much it's going to cost, because you don't want to be blindsided and be stuck, right? So, you know, at Viva, we can sit down at any time and really share with you what the costs are today, what they could be tomorrow, what it could be in 6 months by, you know, kind of giving you, you know, best case scenarios, worst case scenarios for, you know, and then you feel a little bit more comfortable when you're in an environment. So really the part that families tend to realize is that I want to move them into a secured area. They're safe. I don't have to worry about wandering. I don't have to worry about them leaving the community, because that's always such a concern. And I get it, right? Because we sometimes don't know where they're going and it can be very scary. However, you need to also spend some time in a secured area because there's lots of challenges. So you can imagine putting 20 to 50 people together at different stages of the journey. Some have early, some have moderate, some have severe, and how overwhelming that can be for so many people. You often lose that sense of privacy and that sense of self because people wander in and out of my room. They don't knock, they enter, they might yell at me, they might talk to me in a different language because I'm not understanding. You know, it can be very overwhelming. And there can be so much unwanted noise or distractions. So yes, there's a time, and sometimes there's not a time to be in a secured area. And for the reasons I just talked about, it is very, very overwhelming. And you lose a bit of self when you are put into a secured area. So again, I've kind of talked about how Viva can really support along that journey before hopefully the need of a secured area is there. And again, I wanted to share that all of our wellness managers are trained in dementia, in cognitive impairments, and we have some pretty great resources. You know, for instance, I had some newer servers that joined my team, and they came from the restaurant world. You know, when we were going through COVID, we had lots of restaurant people applying to our industry. And so I hired 4 girls that were just a delight. They loved people. They had all the right criteria, but just didn't have the experience dealing with seniors or people with cognitive decline. And so I was able to find great programs within my area. They all went and took courses for me, and they came back inspired, you know, even to a point where I would go to my servers to help me if I had a challenge. You know, what did you learn in your course? I had these challenges. So we really do focus on hiring the right people and then training them so they can manage and learn the tips and tricks. Again, we focus on person-centered discovery all the way from the beginning into every conversation we have. And if there are concerns, there are so many options nowadays. GPS's systems are great. They have shoes now, you know, you just give them one pair of shoes and they're always wearing them. It's connected, it even alerts people. It's great. We have one-on-one companionship. That's always one I go to. You know, that one-on-one quiet moments really goes a long way. If it's a card game, if it's a walk in the garden or a walk somewhere that they're used to doing, those really go a long way. And being collaborative, again, that is super, super important. And then that feeling of security, you know, their apartment is their apartment. No one is walking in or out without being welcomed in. And, you know, I put this less redirection. I know that sounds weird, but you can imagine being in a secured neighborhood when people gather at the door, right? So if 3 people are gathered at the door, I'm going to go check out what's going at the door. So now you have 4 people gathered at the door, and then you have 5 people. So now the team has to redirect and get people doing other things. And then again, I have more people directed here. versus being in a whole community where you have access to people, right? So often I see sitting in the cafe, maybe by themselves, then you have one more person join them and another person join them. You know, community members, people want to help people, right? It's just it's in us to want to. And so it's not just families or team members, other community members supporting each other in an open environment. And again, like I said, access to a community. So that freedom to go kind of where I want, when in reality, truthfully, just not being locked in. So many times they still didn't leave the neighborhood. They still didn't leave the floor, but they weren't locked in. So there wasn't this sense of fear or fright. You know, I often relate when people talk about restraints, you know, I want to keep them somewhere. When you are told, you know, when you hear a fire alarm, so if you hear an alarm, like a bed alarm, you hear an alarm, your first thing is, you know, flight or fight. That's what our bodies are used to. So by locking and by providing restraints or a restraint in any way, it does somewhere in our head make us feel not safe. And then I was so excited. So part of my experience at Whitby, I got to meet Audrey. And so Audrey is a daughter that was going through the journey with her mom, Mary. And she'll get to share with you what her journey was. But when I got to meet Mary, she was nonverbal, so she couldn't tell me what was going on in her head. But my goodness, she just, as soon as you saw her, she brightened any room. She had this unremarkable smile and laugh. And Audrey just wanted to give her mom the best experience she could. And so that's how we ended up meeting. And so I'm excited to introduce Audrey to the conversation.
Hello, everybody. I just wanted to take a minute and thank Amanda for involving me in this presentation today, because I tell anybody the story who'll be willing to listen, is I really think it's important. So my mom had started showing signs of, you know, memory loss and you know, problems communicating. And my siblings and I had very different views of that. They wanted to immediately put her in a memory care ward and lock her up because they just wanted her to be safe and they wouldn't, you know, not want having to worry about that. So they sort of talked her into it. And as soon as she got there, she realized, because she was still very, you know, aware, that wasn't the right place for her. And she was actually quite afraid. She was afraid of some of the residents. She then started spending a lot of time in her room with her door locked. She would pull furniture in front of her door. So this idea of bringing her to a retirement home so she could experience socialization just backfired. So she ended up spending all of her time in her room with her door locked. And I would visit her, knock on the door. She'd say, "Who is it?" I'd say, "It's me," but she was too short to look at the peephole. So when I'd say, "It's really me," she'd be like, "Okay, you can come in." That was just prior to COVID. Once COVID hit, of course, nobody could visit. And it was a very terrible time for her. I brought her back to live with me for a short period of time, maybe from about May of 2020 to when she went to Viva in September. And when she first arrived, she couldn't remember, she didn't know how to use the microwave or the coffee maker because these were things that she didn't have in a secured environment. Because for safety reasons, they just don't want residents to have these things in their room. She was quite capable of doing that. She had been living independently right up until that moment. So once she came back and, you know, I said, "Here's your microwave, here's your, you know, your coffee maker," she was able to gain those skills back again and even made me lunch on most days. So it was good to see that. Now, if you guys all remember in, you know, May 2020, the spring and summer, we weren't allowed to go anywhere. No one was going anywhere. So she wanted to go back to retirement home, but she said absolutely not to that place. So that's where we came across Viva. For my mom, swimming was really important and they had a pool there. So I thought, what a great fit. And I have to say that, you know, when she got there, we tried the independent living at first and then realized, okay, probably the assisted living was a better fit. And she absolutely blossomed and enjoyed her time there. I think probably the most important thing for me was when she was in the secured retirement home environment, she was having dizzy spells and she was, being a bit confused, and they just kept saying, oh, that's just part of the disease. That's just part of, the decline. Within a week of being the first week she was in at Viva, they realized she had an issue with high blood pressure, because they didn't just look at that lens of, oh, this is the box she's in, she has Alzheimer's, this is going to happen. So she was diagnosed with high blood pressure and given blood pressure medication, and all of those symptoms that I even seen with her over the summer seemed to alleviate. She didn't have the dizzy spell. She didn't have, days where, she seemed unwell. So I'm so happy that we found out that was the issue, and not really as much of the cognitive impairment as we thought. So she spent a good year at Viva. It was really great. I loved how all the residents knew her and all the staff knew about her, and everybody kind of kept their eye on her. She didn't ever experience that type of need to go anywhere. Like, I need to go home. I need to go somewhere else. Except for the time where they had a lockdown for a long time. We had a really bad COVID wave, and everybody, and she was just like, this isn't fun. But anyway, we did sort of get her through that period of time. It got to the point where she was just getting a little more confused and lost in the building herself, but also there were other issues too. There was some that it was then time for her to move to a secured facility. And ironically enough, she was there not long, and then she lost really her mobility to walk. So I probably, if I would have just held on a little bit longer, we probably would have been okay for her to stay at Viva. I absolutely loved it. It was the best, it was the best year for her. And I guess that's about it. Sorry, I didn't want to get emotional about it, but it really was an experience. I think if she stayed in memory care, I think she would have declined quickly, and she would have been very unhappy. She very quickly realized that's where she shouldn't have been, and I think that's something that everyone should consider when they're thinking about, how to help their loved one, and how their environment and what should be important. So I think that's pretty much
Thank you, Audrey. On a side note, Audrey knew that her mom dressed up for every occasion, and she kept that alive. She had the best costumes for every holiday you can imagine. So I think a key point that Audrey even, taught us is how important it was to honor the traditions that her mom did, which was just it was a hoot for everybody too. She made us dress up even more because I knew she was going to be dressed up well.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And then I also want to introduce Gord. So Gord is a community member from our Mississauga location. And he also went through a cognitive decline with his beloved wife that he'll share with us.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. My is a little bit different than Amanda. Pardon me. Audrey. Long time ago, I guess, been married 68 years. We got married in 1949. So when my wife was around 80 years old, we just found out that things were a little different. However, she was very active volunteering. She volunteered for many things, a women's shelter, the distress center. She loved helping people. She helped the victim services with the police. She did a lot of that type of thing. But about when she was 80 years old, I could see some changes. One of the things that's most important is that you have to have extreme patience. Patience is one of the biggest things, because Margaret didn't know what she had. She used to come to me and say, why am I like this? What is it that's happening to me? She didn't understand. And the best thing I could tell, and it's funny because I said, well, you remember your mother had Alzheimer's? And she had that memory. Oh, she said, yeah. I says, well, sometimes it's hereditary, and maybe that's what's affecting you. Maybe you're just having some memory problems. Anyway, later on, it's the doctor that you see, and they give you to geriatric services with the hospital, and you go through some treatment and advice, and it's there. And eventually, things get a little tough. But basically, I was looking after my wife for 8 years. I enjoyed it. She looked after me, so why couldn't I look after her? And but it takes a lot of patience, and there comes a time where your health starts to decline, and that's when you have to make a decision that you better look for a place. That's why I picked Viva. I knew somebody that was living here, so I was able to have some conversation with people when we come in. And when we come into Viva, they sat us down at the dining room table, another couple, and my wife and the other lady, who was in the same condition as my wife, became very friendly. And by the way, people with memory problems and Alzheimer's love music. Music is one of the best things that you could give them. They relate to music. And my wife, and Jacqueline was her name, she used to hold hands, and they used to listen to the music in the hall, going down for dinner, and hands in hand. And her husband and I, we giggled as these girls humbled down and had a lot of fun. And Viva was a lot of fun. There's all kinds of programs that are here to keep them interested, keep their minds, little games that you play, and you have to make sure that you take them to all you can. And she did like listening to some TV programs like Jeopardy and so forth, like all people do. But music and your attention, I love being with her. I think she loved me being with her. And the more you're with them, with your partner like that, the better it is for you, for sure. I don't know if there's any questions you'd like to ask, but I'd be glad to give you experience.
Thank you so much, Gord. You see it in your eyes when you speak about her. Every time I hear you speak about her, it's just quite lovely. And so thank you, Gord. We will open it up to questions now. So Gord, Audrey, and myself are available. Sasha, do you want to look at them? Do you want me to look at them?
So I'm just going to start from the top. Amanda, probably more geared towards you, but certainly as they come up. I have a question from Mar. She has a few questions, actually. I'm assuming. What is the ratio of PSW to resident? What is your programming like during a typical day for those with dementia? You mentioned they are not being watched 24/7.
So first of all, we have independent living, which has no care services. And we have assisted living, which includes some care services. So it's hard to give you a ratio because it's based on what the needs are. For instance, Sasha might move in and only needs an hour of care a day versus Joe might move in and needs 3 hours of care a day. And so if Sasha needs 1, then she gets 1 over a day. If Joe needs 3, she gets 3 hours. So it's very individualized to what the needs are. And that's based what our staffing levels are, is based on what our assessments indicate. So a typical day, is kind of hard. So a typical day can be various, but for instance, if they are living on our assisted neighborhood, it's where the nurses and PSWs are. So not that there's not eyes on them, there are 24 hours a day. Our assisted care floor is staffed. Okay. So you'll have your meals 3 times a day. You have activities multiple times a day. And so that's kind of what a typical day kind of looks like. We encourage the activities, we encourage the meals, we encourage quiet time in their own apartments or in our lounges. We have a family den, we have a garden, we have a whole bunch of areas that they can go right off our assisted care floor. So no, they don't have to go up the assisted care floor. Everything can be happen right there. Or they can go up, to any of the amenity spaces like the theater, the movieplex, the gym, the other lounges all over. We have a craft kitchen. I'm sure I'm missing some amenity spaces. Some have golf simulators. So there's a whole bunch of things that they can still do. So a typical day will really be based on what their needs are on staffing level. Their needs are for activities and stimulation that they want.
I'd like to add, I'll add, if you don't mind, actually, I'll open the conversation to Audrey. Audrey, maybe you can share with us some of the things that your mother did, as probably best coming from you and Gord than from Amanda or myself. If you can think of some ways that your mom enjoyed spending her days. I'm sure she had friends and did different events. So share a bit with us if you don't mind.
Sure. So my mom had a bit of a routine. She was an early bird, and then I always had a nap in the morning, which I thought was, you've just been up, but that was just her. So she definitely went to all of her meals. That was not anything that she ever missed. She enjoyed food. And then usually in the afternoon, she would putter around for a little bit, and then she'd have a little rest in the afternoon. And then around maybe mid-afternoon till dinner time was always a time where she, liked to wander in the building. I should probably use that word. Walk around in the building, talk to people. Do you remember how she used to join your staff meetings? I thought that was great. You had 2 staff meetings a day where, your staff just kind of got together and said, what's happening with everybody in the building? I think how do we make everyone's day great? And she would just join them. She would just and not that she had a lot to say, but she just loved being, standing around chatting with people. She spent time in the cafe. I would usually visit her, usually in the evenings, and we'd either go swimming or go out for a walk in the garden. And then we'd always stop in the cafe for a snack. She had her favorites. And then that would be sort of the wind down to the end of her day. Then she would get, they would help her get ready for bed, and off she would go, and the day would begin again tomorrow.
Thank you.
I can kind of share, when we first got to meet Mary, we were all a little bit nervous, right? Just about, she was leaving memory care. She was leaving that secured, and what was it going to be like? And if we couldn't find her for a meal, it was a bit of, okay, where is she? But then we got to know her. We knew she's going to probably be in the cafe, or she's going to be sitting, down in the lounge. We got to know her, right? So her walking the community became quite normal, and it wasn't a risk because she wasn't leaving the community. So we managed that risk, right? We were nervous about the risk. What was it going to be like with Mary? But, like I said, she really loved the cafe because it was a hub, right? So she got to see people. And even though she couldn't always communicate exactly, she just did. She just talked and people listened, and it didn't always make sense sometimes, but it was, you could tell she was telling something great or a joke. She thinks she's pretty funny, right? So if you just laughed, then she laughed, right? So Audrey and I talked about that risk a lot, right? What would it look like? And then, like I said, after 3 or 4 weeks, it was normal, right? We knew Mary was going to be somewhere. We didn't stress. We didn't freak out, we didn't panic when we didn't find her, because we knew she was somewhere in the building. So she took that freedom, and we didn't kind of stifle that freedom.
One thing
could-
she got used to doing too is just when she came downstairs, she would always just check in at the front desk.
Yep.
And then, she would just stop and say hi to everybody. So you always knew where she was because that became part of her routine. So I think at one point there was temperatures being taken every day. And even though when that stopped, she still went over to get her temperature taken. And, sure, we'll take your temperature. It was just a routine that was created.
Very
So
good.
she never did go far. And a lot of the residents kept their eye out for her. Maybe if she went outside the front door, somebody would just kind of go out and sit down and chat with her, and they just sort of really became a community around her. So I thought that was lovely.
I should have mentioned
Mhm.
when I was talking before that I didn't think that they would take Margaret here when I came to Viva. You didn't know, there's that gray area and you wonder, oh dear, wonder if they take people with, because we didn't know. But it was the best thing that happened to me. The best thing that happened for my wife. And coming here, I just thinking of some of the great things that happen. And they bring in an orchestra, a little band, and we be dancing in the big lobby they have here. And great memories of that because it was wonderful. But here I'm going back, music. They love that music. So that's
We
one
all
of the
do,
things.
don't we, Gord?
Well,
I
it's
said we all
very,
do.
it's very important. But anyway, sorry, go back.
Nope, no,
That's
good.
Yeah, it's
Back
perfect.
to you.
I was going to ask you to share some details anyway, Gord, so I appreciate that. But I think in summary, I think what I'm hearing from both Audrey and from Gord is that feeling of community is so strong and caring for one another and how someone benefits so much from a structured environment, all of those things leading to a very successful stay at our Viva retirement community. So I thank you for sharing that. One of the other questions from Mar as well is, I think we've kind of answered it in some of the conversations. There was a question just around how often is one-on-one, and I think Amanda, you addressed the one-on-one as sort of an added service. Maybe you can just chat a moment on that.
Yeah, so it can look various one-on-one. So one-on-one can be an additional service, okay? But it also doesn't always have to be. It can be a programming where they come down to the program. If they needed more hands-on, we have a team member to help, right? So, or it could be we've done part of, they could. So you really have to look at what their needs are today. So for instance, if an hour of care is included and they're still able to do a lot for themselves and they don't quite need that hour, I set somebody up to go for a walk. So they took 20 minutes of that prearranged hour and they went for a walk instead. So it's the care that is purchased or the time that is purchased can be used in various ways. So we try to be super creative with using, maybe some support from the community to balance out to get the care that you need. So one-on-one typically is one-on-one, exactly one-on-one for whatever you purchase, but there's also many creative ways that we use to get the supports needed, if that makes sense. And then kind of monitoring, it's again so individual, but for instance, again, I think I've briefly talked about it. It's really, all meal times, all activity times, the nursing, the PSWs are all on our assisted care floor. So there's people always on that floor 24 hours a day. They know where their community members are at all times. They as a PSW, if I have 4 people I take care of, or if I have 10 people I take care of, they know where those 10 or 4 or how many my group is. They know where they are. They take, they make sure they're at meals. They help them, function through the day. So that's kind of typical what it looks like.
Thanks.
And then, yeah, I'm just finishing that one. And then falling. So we don't automatically go door to door at night and do night checks. Okay. So it is it could be an added fee, it could be part of their care package, right? Just to kind of depends. But disturbing people while they're sleeping isn't functional. Like we've learned that in long-term care, that we see more falls when we're disturbing people. So it's really based on individual needs. So hopefully if somebody falls, they understand how to push the button. If they don't, maybe we set up with a once a night check, twice a night check, so it really is an individual base. If they get night checks, it's what they desire or what they need.
Thanks, Amanda. And there is another question here that says, if they're not in an activity or a meal, where would they be? And I just would like to preempt this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but everybody's level of cognitive impairment is different. And so many of the community and many of the folks living within our retirement communities are certainly occupying themselves. Certainly the dementia or the cognitive decline is not necessarily severe. So they live quite happily within our communities, participating in, happy hour, or watching the gentlemen play billiards, because they're quite aggressive at Viva Mississauga billiards. It's a big deal. So they really just find a way to involve themselves and find a place where they really enjoy the interaction. So I think it's important to say that we don't overstimulate and occupy every moment of the day, but certainly where needed, we absolutely do. Would you consider that to be a fair comment?
Yes, Sasha, I think that's right.
Yeah, very good. So we have another question here from Fatima. Hello, Fatima. She's a follower of ours. Thank you for joining us. And she's asking about the GPS and how it's used in memory loss. So do you mind shedding some light on that? I think that's a service that a lot of folks are unaware of. So whatever you can share would be quite helpful.
Absolutely. So GPS has come such a long way. So right now, there's some great systems that are a shoe. The GPS is built into the sole of the shoe. It's pretty inexpensive, and it is tapped to an app on your phone. And so it alerts you when it's outside the barriers. Okay, so for instance, if they were in a community, you would set the parameter of, maybe they walk the community, you're okay with that. So maybe it's like the street over, right? That's when it alarms and it sends the person with the app the notification that, Joe has passed 6th Street, whatever it might come up with. Okay. They also have it in watches. So they have it in devices now that are, very, very inconspicuous, that they wouldn't know they're wearing it. You have to find an item that they're going to wear every day, right? That's always the key. And that was always a bit of a challenge previously. Right? It was a little thing, maybe a little sticker we put on something, or something you wore, and if they didn't wear it, we were no help, right? So now I really love that it's the shoe, right? So you give them one pair of shoes or two. I think there's a summer and winter style, there's a running shoe, but they're all built in with that GPS. You don't even have to worry about it. That's when the pendant, like Gord just waved, is Viva has pendants that if they're pressed anywhere in the community and a small radius, and in our parking lot, in our pathway, if you press it, we know where you are. Okay, so if Gord was to fall in the parking lot, he could press his pendant and it would say Gord is in the parking lot. So we're like, okay, we go find Gord
even in the pool.
Even in the pool, exactly. But if you don't wear it, that's when it becomes a little bit more of a challenge, right? So that's where the GPS systems can really, really help.
That's one thing I encourage. There's a lot of guys around here say, "Oh, I don't need to wear it," but I said, "What if you fall? What would happen to you?"
Exactly. No,
I
Gord,
said, put it on.
I used to tell everybody, if you wear it, you'll never need it. And if you don't, you're gonna need it. So just wear it and keep everybody happy.
Use it or you'll lose it.
Exactly, Gord.
I think the Alzheimer's Society has a lot of, they have like a store, and they have lots of products like that. And I've even seen really beautiful necklaces with
absolutely
like jewelry. So something like that, if there some is,
Yeah, they've come a long way.
Mm-hmm.
A true
Absolutely.
testament to all the other devices we can use to continue to live sufficiently within a retirement community for folks with cognitive decline. Thank goodness for, sometimes technology takes us places we don't want to go, but on another spectrum, it really can really help a lot in many ways. So that's wonderful. Thank you. Question here, how do other community members react to those with dementia, and do they also eat in the same dining room? Amanda, if you will.
Yep. I can tell you that there are going to be some people that avoid it, and there are some people that embrace it. It's kind of like high school sometimes. There's always going to be a group that don't embrace you, and there is going to be a group that want to help. So I see that in retirement. We're at this point, we're adults, which is a good thing. So I don't typically see anybody being mean towards them. I just see avoidance, right? We have 2 dining rooms in our community. So we do have a main floor dining room, which is typically for our independent people. And we have an assisted neighborhood that has its own dining room. So we typically have, everyone who lives on, independent eats on the main floor. Everyone on assisted living eats on assisted living. However, I know at Whitby, we were very flexible, right? So sometimes I don't think Audrey, I think Audrey did transition, or she ate on the main floor for a little bit.
She did, yep. And then when
Right.
she was on the assisted living, she was there. Actually, she just preferred having more people around her, like more staff, more regular people. That was her
Right. So for me, I always kind of kept them in the main floor. Like if they were used to the main floor dining room, I kept them there until they needed support, right? If they need support, I don't have, we only have servers in the main floor. We're assisted. We have the PSW and the nursing team. So when you need that kind of support, that's where they kind of go, if that makes sense. So we have 2 dining rooms that they can eat out of.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. A question here, and I know you addressed it in your presentation. Maybe you could just quickly speak to, because I'm just looking at the time, we're already at 10 after, and we have a couple more questions. When is it too late to move someone with dementia?
I wish I had a magic ball. It's one of those types of questions. And, earlier is always the best, just because they get to know and they build a sense of security, and they build a sense of recognition when it's earlier, right? Really, there is a point where moving is just harder. And I can't tell you when that is. Really, it's individual. But like I said, earlier, the better. It's always helpful.
Thank you. Thank you. Part of the next question has already been addressed about PSWs during the day, but there is a second part here that says, for those that don't feel safe to move or walk around by themselves, will they be left alone in their room if they are not attending an activity? And I know you've kind of addressed this as well, but maybe you could just give one more go at it.
Absolutely. So in the beginning days, the first month is always that challenge. You might see them left behind a little bit, but it's until they get to know what they want, what they do, right? So no, we don't. The lifestyles team is great, and they track and we talk as a group. So in leadership meetings, the Viva managers say, we're not seeing Mrs. Smith in activities. They'll make an avid, they'll go talk to them. They'll go figure out if it's somebody with the cognitive decline. They'll talk to a family member or the next person who's close to them. Say, okay, what, for Audrey's, I might have went to say, Audrey, Mary's not doing much. What could we do with her? What would she be interested in? What would bring her joy, right? And then we'll try and figure out how to get her out of her apartment to go do these things. But in fairness, we talk a lot about honoring the person, but it's okay when they change, and we have to be okay with that too. If they don't want to go, we can't pressure people, we can't force people, because maybe today they don't want to do it, and we have to be okay with that. So that can be hard sometimes for families, because they feel like they're not getting everything they want out of retirement. But there have been moments, and I have seen people that just don't want to do it every day, right? So then our goal is maybe not every day, maybe it's twice a week. We get them out to something for that social interaction. So we really try to to look at it in individual basis. But no, our goal is to never just say, okay, they're in their room, we're not going to worry about them. We do look at everybody individually and get them involved in some aspect.
Thank you, Amanda. And a question from
On that
Barb.
note, can I just mention one thing that your recreation staff
I was
did?
just going to say,
Oh.
sorry, I was just going to say, I shared my wife's journey with her. It was a little different than yours.
Yeah.
So for sure. So one thing was your recreation staff got a bunch of brightly colored different socks from, the dollar store. And because my mom was a homemaker, that she never played cards. She, never did a lot of things typical to some of the retirement activities. But what they did was they just said, hey, Mary, can you help us sort this laundry out? And she would like, sure. And so they, she'd be out by in front of the nurse's station, chatting with people and had an activity to do that was meaningful for her, because for her, that was just something that was a part of her life. So they were always clean socks. They were new socks. And sometimes I said to her, do you want me to get you a job in the laundry room down? And she'd be like, no, this is enough. So it was just enough to keep her occupied, but it wasn't a structured activity. So it was just a neat way of approaching keeping her busy and engaged that wasn't, on the slate of activity sheet, basically.
That's
So great point.
Yeah, thank you. I have another question here, Amanda, regarding respite care. And if with the respite care, the community member would have someone bring them around to meals and to programs.
Yes, absolutely. Our respite is kind of a full care model technically for you to get the best experience. So yes, they will ensure they're going to meals, that they're experiencing all the activities they want to experience. And if they don't even want to go on activity, but they're going to maybe take them to the lounge or take them up to the bar or take them down to the gym or take them to the garden, that they'll have access to all those things.
Wonderful. And one final last question before I thank you all for your time is around dementia-specific programming. Perhaps you can shed some light on that, please, Amanda.
Absolutely. So I'd say right now our communities are moving into dementia-specific programming. We have, Sasha, I think 3 communities right now with a specific programming.
That's right.
So it will all come into every other Viva, if not this year or in the upcoming months. Other than that, we still do. So like Audrey said, our lifestyle team still takes, we still have the training about programming for dementia, and we do involve some of those programming into our calendar for mental stimulation, for cognitive stimulation, for activities that will support somebody with dementia. So it's based on the community and what they have, right? So if they have somebody or have people that need some more, geared programming, then that's what our communities will do.
Sure. And I'd like to just add, the participation in the fitness programming as well. I'm sorry if I missed that, if you mentioned it earlier, but certainly the fitness programming and group settings are very popular and active for everybody who lives in the community, regardless of your physical or your mental capabilities. So I just wanted to add that as well. So it doesn't necessarily need to be dementia specific. There are activities that are broad range and available to everybody based on their likes, desires, and functions. So thank you very, very much. We are running out of time. There are a couple of other questions that maybe we can answer either privately to some of the folks in the audience or through a second session, which is something that I know our teams at Viva Oakville and Viva Mississauga are considering. First and foremost, on behalf of the audience and everyone, I'd like to say thank you so much to Audrey and Gord for sharing your stories and being vulnerable. I mean, we felt your emotion, both of you, in your conversations and in your stories. And we want to thank you wholeheartedly for sharing that with us and providing insight to folks in the audience who are maybe, considering the very same options and aren't sure exactly where to go, because there is no crystal ball. You didn't have anybody leading you through these programs either. You did research, you did the best that you could by the person that you loved, and it worked out favorably for them and for you, and of course for us. And we want to thank you for investing, personally with Viva Retirement Communities, because we were happy to have been able to support you, and we love these relationships. So thank you very much to.
It's very, very, very important. Don't leave it too late. I've always said, don't leave it too late.
You are 100% right, Gord. Absolutely 100%. And I appreciate you adding that in, because that's so important. And to the people that are getting ready to type away, there's no crystal ball to know when it's too late. It's always important to be in charge of your destiny. And so if you're starting to think about it, it's probably a good time. So I think that's a very strong indicator for you to learn what your options are and to focus on maintaining the stimulation and high function as much as possible in a place and an environment where your loved one feels safe, loved, and cared for. So thank you very much. Amanda, thank you so much for putting together this great presentation on behalf of both of our communities. We may just take the show on the road or have you come back again and do more great presentations for us. So thank you very much for that. I would just like to, I promise I'm done, one more thing. I'd like to let everybody know that a survey will follow in the next few days via email to those of you who participated. And we would really appreciate it if you took the time to fill in the information as honest as possible. We are here to bring to you education and information on things that are of interest to you. So your feedback on today's presentation, if you have questions that we were unable to answer because of time, please include them in this survey, and we promise to get that back to you. So please watch for that, and your community relations manager, so Carolyn, Megan, Katie, or Nicholas, will follow up with you regarding the details around that. Before I sign off on behalf of all of us, is there anything else that the three of you would like to say? That's a pretty definitive note. You're good. Thank you very much. To the audience, thank you very much. And we hope to see you again. Everybody stay healthy, and I hope to see you all soon. All the best. Thanks for staying on. Take care. Bye.